Star Trek books. They've been around for decades. Join us, the Trek ladies, Kavura and Jen, as we discuss the novels one at a time. Welcome to the Ladies Trek Library.
Hello, and we're back with Ladies Trek Library. And I'm Kavura, and I'm here with Jen. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Kavura, and hey, listeners. I'm so happy to be back talking about Star Trek books.
All right, so our book this time is Contamination by John Vornholt. It's Star Trek The Next Generation book number 16. And here's from the back of the book. The Enterprise crew is stunned when famed scientist Lynn Costa is murdered in one of the ship's science labs. She and her husband Emil were known as science's greatest ongoing collaboration, and together they had received the Federation's highest honors for their achievements in scientific research. Determined to see the culprit brought to justice, Captain Picard assigns Lieutenant Worf and Chancellor Deanna Troi to the case. Their routine investigation of the ship's science labs soon reveals a dangerous web of deceit, betrayal, and madness. Now, Worf and Troi find themselves struggling against a ruthless assassination set on revenge, for whom murder is only the beginning.
All right, so in this book, the central characters are Lieutenant Worf and Counselor Troi, and as well as Ensign Wesley Crusher to a lesser degree. And then we have several original characters who are scientists working aboard the Enterprise on a project called the Contamination Project. What did you think of these original characters? We have humans Lynn and Emil Costa. We have Shauna Russell, also a human, who's a lab assistant. The project manager of the Microcontamination Project, who's a betazoid named Karn Milu. And then a Vulcan named Saduk and an Antarian named Grasto. So that's a lot of characters, but let's go through and talk about what we thought about these characters.
I thought they were all good characters. So all of these characters were working on the project with Emil and Lynn Costa, and I think the author did a good job of bringing them all out. I mean, it seems like a lot of characters, but we did get to know something about them, and each of them was thrown in as a possible suspect in the murder. But I do like the way that they were all handled, and the fact that they, we got to know these characters, plus some of the main characters like Worf and Deanna were also used well in the book. So some people got a lot of good attention in this story.
Yeah, it does sound like a lot of characters, but you're right. Reading it, it really didn't sound like too many because the author really gives you enough detail about each of them that you really feel like you get to know them. They almost seem sort of like major characters in the book. Of course, the Costas are, but all these characters are pretty well fleshed out for being minor characters, original to this book. I thought it was particularly interesting to see another betazoid on the ship because I haven't read another book where there's been a betazoid on the Enterprise. And he was a very different kind of a person than Deanna Troi. He's very, almost seems like a bit of an arrogant and short-tempered. And it was interesting to see how Troi, she felt a bit hesitant, and maybe she kind of didn't like being around him because she felt like she had to impress him and that she was never going to live up to his expectations because she's only half betazoid and didn't have all the telepathic abilities that he did. So that was kind of interesting to get her perspective on serving with another betazoid. And then what was also interesting I thought about these characters was that these are all characters who, for the most part, have been on the Enterprise a long time. The lab assistant, Shauna Russell, I think they said she had been only there for 6 months, but everybody else had been there quite a while. So, on the show, we know it's a big ship and that there's all these people there, scientists, and, but you don't ever get to see all of the hundreds of other people living on the ship that have been there the whole time. So that was kind of interesting to get to see some of the people that we don't really see from the show.
Yeah, I like that, and the fact that Karn Malou was so he said he's the head of the science department and that he's over 400 people. And I thought, like, wow, that's amazing that there's 400 science people on the Enterprise, and I think they have said that they've got over 1,000 on the ship, so that's possible, but that did seem like a lot, and that's like, wow. So the science department is pretty big, and even for Karn Malou, I mean, yeah, you're right how he is so different, a Betazoid, yeah, a very big contrast to Deanna. And he really, like, I didn't really see him as a likable character, and I think he was supposed to be that way. He's supposed to be this stuffy leader that's, that doesn't really care about being friends. He just seemed like he was just there to do his job. And he was interesting, the way he, the fact that he was another Betazoid, and I liked that we learned some other things about Betazoids in the book, like the way, like the code that Deanna found. He had that secret Betazoid code that like you had to be a Betazoid to even figure out or to even understand. That was an interesting, thing in the book, a new thing that we learned about them.
Yeah, the Betazoid code. Now, I actually, that's one thing I forgot that I was going to ask about, and we can talk about it now, although we haven't gotten into a lot of the other stuff. But that's one thing that I thought was sometimes, when you read, there's a little bit of fudging, and there was this idea that Karn Milu had encoded some documents in this code that Betazoids have, that it's supposed to be some sort of code where the only person that can read it is the person who wrote it, and that they go into some sort of like trance to be able to read it. And when Deanna Troi is trying to, find out what this code is, she goes into the holodeck and tries to like make herself into a sort of trance-like state where she'll be able to be in his frame of mind and read this code, which she, eventually is successful in being able to read some of it. I don't know, that, that part was a little like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they like really explained it because they probably couldn't, because it was such a new idea. I just thought it was an interesting idea, but yeah, it is a little it's a little unexplained, and so you are wondering like how they could do that.
But well, I'll give him a pass. He fudged that part a little bit. So we also mentioned Wesley Crusher is another sort of major character in this book. He's an ensign at this point, although the book was written, early on, to the point where he must have just been a relatively new ensign, and I don't even know if he was officially an ensign at this point, or he just was, on the bridge as an acting ensign. And Worf enlists his help to spy on Emil Costa, because Wesley has a previous relationship with him where Emil Costa used to tutor Wesley in science, and so he, wants him to spy on him. And at this point, Emil Costa is a prime suspect in a murder, and the whole thing with, now I don't know how old Wesley was supposed to be, at this point. I thought when he was first an acting ensign that, he was 16 or 17. I mean, maybe he was 18 by this point. But Worf's, asking this child basically to spy on someone who is a prime suspect in a murder, and I thought it was pretty dangerous, and I kind of was like, I don't know that that's a decision that I really could see Worf making. And later on, when Beverly Crusher finds out about it, of course she's really angry, but that the whole scenario with Wesley, spying on Emil Costa as a young person, I don't know, and kind of was another issue that I had a little bit with the book. What did you think about that?
Um, it's interesting. I didn't think of it from that angle, but I did think that it was strange that Worf would ask Wesley, because he was asking Wesley to be dishonest, really. Like could you try to get closer to Emil and get some information out of him? That seemed, so I was thinking like, well, did Worf really have the right to ask Wesley to do something like that? So yeah, it seemed fishy to me too. I wasn't exactly thinking of it from from Wesley being in danger. I mean, yeah, that's a possibility too. So yeah, that was something different in the book. Yeah, like one of the problems with the book. Yeah.
Yeah, and Wesley, of course, is not a member. Maybe it would have been a different story if Wesley was an ensign in the security team, but he wasn't. And so. But I'll give that a pass too. It wasn't a major. I didn't feel like it, took away from the book that much. It wasn't like a flaw, a major flaw or anything.
But it did kind of, it did wind up putting Wesley in danger and things like
Yeah.
that. But I guess it would have happened to someone anyway. But yeah.
Although maybe somebody older, but
Yeah.
but yeah. And so a lot of the story takes place when the Enterprise is in orbit in orbit over a new starbase called Chiron Rock, which is a starbase that is built into an asteroid. And this is actually one part that I really liked is when they go on to visit to the starbase, and it's like having its official grand opening, I guess you could say. And there's dignitaries and stuff there. The descriptions of this starbase to me just felt he did a really good job on that, and it just sounded like a really cool starbase built into a rock. And I don't know that was if that was ever on the show or not. I feel like maybe it was, or maybe it was in a book I read about a starbase being built in an asteroid. But I just thought that was neat.
That was a neat idea. Yeah, I don't remember it exactly on the show. I know in the books have had something like they've had like a civilization living in an asteroid. They've had something like that, but
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
yeah, but that was interesting. Having the starbase was good. Another interesting thing in the book, I like the use of the Creole. I know that race had been used before in another book before this one, but I like how they were in this book. Even though like it's not really one of my favorite races or anything, but I like how they were kind of used as comic relief in this, but they still seemed like interesting characters. They were used to be funny, but they were also enemies to watch out for, and they were good foils for the rest of the crew. So I like how they were used.
Yeah, they were an interesting race. I don't recall ever reading a book that they were in, so if that was in another book, I think it's one that I didn't read, or maybe I read it a long time ago and I just forgot. But yeah, they were interesting. They were used to be kind of funny, and it was also how it was useful to the plot because the Klingons were also visiting the starbase, but the Creole and the Klingons are known to hate each other, and so the Enterprise, being the diplomats having to arrange all this stuff, had to do very careful planning about not letting the Creole and the Klingons be together. And so scheduling around that. And of course, they didn't, Worf had to kind of hide out because they didn't want the Creole to know their security officer was a Klingon. So that kind of helped the plot along and made it interesting. And some of the things that happened were as a direct result of them having to make these kind of weird arrangements so that the Creole and the Klingons could avoid each other.
Yes, yeah, it all kind of worked well with the plot.
Now, before we get into like the murder mystery itself, is there anything other than some that we talked a little bit about, like some of the things that I thought were like maybe little flaws, but I didn't find them like, oh, I just like them so much. But there were some things that I kind of was like, oh, I wish this book would have been better if they took these things out. There were some scenes with Wesley Crusher where he's sort of having, I don't say romantic thoughts about Shauna Russell, the lab assistant, but like kind of, almost sexual. And it was kind of weird. And then there's like a scene where Deanna Troi is interviewing the Vulcan Saduk. And she starts to have these romantic thoughts about, well, what would it be like to be with a Vulcan? Could you be in a romantic relationship with them? And to me, it was just so weird to these two things in there. And I was like, why is this in the book? Like, it just kind of weird. I don't know. That was really my only issue with the book, were these sort of little romantic thoughts, sexual thoughts. It just seemed out of place to me. I don't know. What did you think?
They were out of place, like that. Those things weren't really necessary in the book, I guess. But it is interesting. Like okay, so Wesley was interested in Shauna Russell, the scientist lady. The thing is that John Vornholt also wrote the first two books in the A Time 2 series, and in those books Wesley was older because it was after The Next Generation, so it was after he had already become a traveler. But in those stories he came back and had a romantic relationship with someone else that was on the Enterprise. So it's interesting. I guess Vornholt likes Wesley or something and wants to have him in a relationship, but so that's just some connection I made there, like, oh, so here he's got Wesley kind of being interested, but later on he has Wesley actually involved with someone. So yeah, that's something that he put in the book. The thing with Sadek, yeah, I don't know why that would be in here. I guess it was, but maybe I guess it was just to give the reader something to think maybe. Like maybe Sadek did it, and maybe Deanna's going to fall in love with a murderer or something like that. I don't know, but
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, I mean it could be, or even Shanna, or maybe Wesley was falling in love with a murderer too, whoever it was. I mean, it's just So it's like, like what happens if that person was the person they were looking for? But with Sadek, it was like, well, yeah, like you wouldn't even think, why would Deanna be interested in him anyway? And why would he even think about it? Like, it does seem strange. Like, what was his interest in her? He did say that he thought she was beautiful, and that did seem kind of out of place. Like, why would he say that to her?
Yeah, but you make a good point, because I didn't think of that. It could be the author was trying to show us that, oh, we have some of our regular cast member or regular characters who are sort of falling for people, and what if it's the murderer? So that could have been trying to bring in some drama in there. But yeah, there's like this scene where Deanna, has these thoughts about Saduk, and oh, could I be in a relationship with the Vulcan? And of course he's not interested, being a Vulcan. But then later on, when they meet again, then he's like, oh, by the way, I'm available for a relationship. Kind of like, I was like, okay.
That's right. Yeah, he was. Yeah, it's very strange. But it makes you wonder. I guess they're making you wonder what's going to happen in the rest of the book. But yeah.
So, as far as the murder mystery, did you think this was a good murder mystery? And did you like the fact that this is a Star Trek episode / murder mystery?
Yeah, I did. I thought the murder mystery was good in this. The fact that Worf and Troi had to work together. Worf would have to do it because he's the security officer. And the thing is, Worf never really got to solve a mystery. Like if you look back at Deep Space Nine, I mean, Odo solved some mysteries as security officer, but Worf never really got to, because his job was more like being the muscle, being the one with the phaser, the protection type of security, not really the kind that had to solve mysteries. So it was neat to see him do that here, and working with Deanna, and the fact that Deanna didn't really like him at this time, And the book does mention that she didn't like him because when she had that pregnancy in the episode The Child, that Worf wanted to abort it. And that is something that I did hear, that Marina Sirtis had thought that way, that Deanna would hate Worf because of that time that he wanted to abort her baby. And then later on, like a few years later on the show, Worf and Troi supposedly made up because they did eventually have the relationship together on the show. So anyway, so it was neat to see them working together, and Deanna was kind of like, I think she kind of got to like working with Worf. She kind of liked him a little bit more after working with him in this. So, but in that way, it was good seeing them work together, and because we know later on that they will have a romance together. But the murder mystery itself, I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was good the way they threw all these suspects, and I think they kind of made them all look like equally, like they each one could have done it. Even though, I mean, I know you've got like the Antarian who seems really innocent, but you still think, I mean, because when you're reading a book, you think, well, the one that seems the most innocent could have been the one who did it. So it was a good, interesting mystery. What did you think?
Yeah, you kind of like an Agatha Christie novel. You have all these characters, and there's all different ones have motive, or some of them have well, they all sort of had an opportunity, and some of them seem to have a motive, and others didn't. But even when you're thinking about the ones that didn't have a motive, at least a motive that you were aware of, that kind of made you maybe suspect them more. Like, oh, well, the person who had the biggest motive, obviously it's not them. That would be too easy, right? So
Right.
it's got to be, one of these other people, and who doesn't have a very obvious motive. And of course, with the Vulcan Sadok in there, of course, Deanna and Worf, who are investigating, want to kind of rule him out right away because, Vulcans supposedly don't lie. But then you think, is he really hiding something? Like, could this be a Vulcan who's lying? Because we have seen that. So, yeah. And interestingly, what you're saying about Deanna and Worf, to go back to that, I never really thought about that, but that was really interesting how I didn't know that Marina Sirtis had said that. But as I was reading this, I thought, yeah, I never thought about that, but it makes so much sense that she really didn't like him and had a lot of resentment over the situation with her wanting to abort her baby. So that was interesting. And then also I read in Voyages of the Imagination, there's a little tiny paragraph from the author about the book, not much at all, but he mentions that he is the first person to pair Troi and Worf in a meaningful way. Because at that time, obviously, there was nobody probably would have guessed any sort of romantic relationship between the two of them. So that was interesting.
Yeah, they're like the least likely to get together.
Right. Right. And in this one, she is still like, kind of flirting with Will Riker and stuff like that because they had a previous relationship. I love murder mysteries. I thought this was a really good murder mystery. The only thing that I'll say is, and it could have been intended to be that way, but as Worf is investigating, Worf has his mind set on a certain suspect, and he's just kind of like going straight down that path. And the whole time I'm reading that, I thought he's not doing a really good job because Worf ends up prosecuting the case when it's supposed to go to trial. Because when you have like a single-mindedness about it and you already make an assumption about, oh, this person must be the murderer, and you're not, researching, looking at other suspects and going down other possibilities. And I had a good guess as to who the murderer was. I wasn't like 100% sure, but it turned out I was right. And I thought, Worf, if I can figure out that maybe it's not who you think it is, So did you have the murderer figure out?
No, I didn't, because Yeah. Like I said, to me, it just felt like they were all it could have been any of them, and yeah, maybe I did suspect the one, but still, I wasn't sure because it kind of that I thought the writer did a good job of kind of throwing shade on all of them, and even what Worf did. Well, yeah, yeah, you think he might have been a little off, like in the way he did it, because he was so single-minded in thinking who it was. Um, like I haven't really read, like I've never read Agatha Christie. I don't read a lot of murder mysteries. The thing is, I've read Sherlock Holmes, and not all of those stories are really murder mysteries. But I know that this one, like Worf and Troi, they're nothing like Sherlock Holmes in their investigations. But
No, I think Sherlock Holmes would have had this one figured out.
yeah, exactly.
Because there is a scene where the one that bothered me the most. Now, of course, I will say, at the end, Worf realizes, you know what, I've got a lot to learn. I was single-mindedly pursuing one suspect and was blinded to other stuff. And so he kind of grows from that experience. So that's good. But there is a part where, Wesley Crusher overhears two people arguing, and then later on, one of them ends up dead. And so then they're immediately jumping onto this, what we've already said, the prime suspect, Emil Costa, that he must have done it because he was seen arguing with the murder victim shortly before he died. And I thought, like, that's not enough to assume the person's the prime suspect. Like, everybody knows that, right? Like,
Yeah.
you see, but it was a growing experience for Worf, so it was character development. But I will say that even though I had a good idea who I thought the murderer was, I would never have guessed the motive, because this person, the motive, I didn't really see one, or see one that, what it turned out to be. The motive that I thought this person could have had, you would have never known, because there's kind of a secret about this person that you don't find out, that you wouldn't really have known. So that was kind of a cool twist at the end, finding out, this is why the person did it, and this secret tied to some information that they had given you in the book in the past, but you would not have known. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was interesting. And another thing I liked was having the trial, the last few chapters where Data was defending Emil Costa. I mean, some of that was interesting, and the way the trial went on, it was a neat little thing to throw in the book too.
Yeah, the trial part was interesting, and of course, Worf being the prosecutor, and Data being the defender, because Emil Costa had asked Wesley, if you had to have someone defend you, who would it be? And he said Data, and so he chose Data, who was gonna do a good job. So that was interesting to see, especially because this had happened right after Data had been put on trial. So.
And because Data was one who couldn't be bribed or swayed, he was just going to be totally impartial and only go after the truth and not be emotional about it. Yeah, so that was a good idea. And I like how what else? Picard having he had the friend on the base too. That was a JAG officer, and you're wondering, like, why couldn't that have been Philippa Louvois that was from The Measure of a Man?
Yeah, he did. She was kind of another minor character that they kind of, gave her a personality. She was an old friend of Picard's, so that was kind of nice to see that. But overall, I thought it was a great murder mystery, despite the kind of little things that bug me here and there. I love murder mysteries, and it really kept me turning the page, trying to figure out what the resolution would be. So.
Oh, and also, yeah, just say we learned a lot about science too, right? Now that the contamination and how they have to wear the clean suit, and those kind of things were interesting too. Like I wonder how if the writer had to research all of that, to have that in the story.
I think that he did, because in this little blurb in Voyages of the Imagination, he says, this book has a lot of real science in the cleaning room setting aboard the Enterprise. Now, he doesn't say how much research or who he, would have contacted to research, or, what kind of research he did. But yeah, there is a lot of interesting science about this project that they're working on that is about keeping stuff from being contaminated, I guess you could say, in simple terms. The Costas had invented technology to do filters in the transporter, and they were trying to do stuff that would keep things from being contaminated. And one of the science team members, Grasto, the Antarian, was serving with the Costas because they had helped save his planet from a plague or a bacteria or a virus or something. So yeah, it was very interesting to learn about all these procedures and their projects on the microcontamination project. A lot of times the tech stuff goes really over my head. There are certain authors that get into it, and I feel like I'm just reading it and I'm like, blah, 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 I can't understand what this is about. But I thought this was done in a way that, was easy to understand and for somebody with no science background. So it was interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was well written, and the science part was explained pretty well. So, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
We're ready to give our reviews, our ratings?
Yes, that's just what I was going to get to. So, I would say I would give this like a 4 out of 5 Quatloos. Only not a 5 just because like I never go too high, like 5, because there's a few that are 5 for me, like Spock's World and The Never-Ending Sacrifice, and this one was really good, and it's really one of my favorites. But just not quite as much of a favorite as some of the other ones, but nevertheless, maybe even a 4.5.
Okay, I'm gonna say like 3.5 Quatloos out of 5. I liked it. It's just, it was good. I just want to say, just not as good as some of the others. Yeah, I think that's it. But it was entertaining. I do recommend it.
Yeah, I think if you like murder mysteries, if you haven't read Agatha Christie, but I would say anyone who likes Agatha Christie, you would probably like this. It's definitely, like you said, not a Sherlock Holmes type thing, because Worf does not pay attention to details the way Sherlock Holmes does. But it's, I love murder mysteries, and John Vornholt had actually said in his thing that the reason he chose to do it is because he really liked the murder mysteries that had been on the original series, and when he wrote this, there really hadn't been that kind of thing on Next Generation. So yeah, if you like murder mysteries, I definitely recommend it. And Deanna Troi, that was another, if you're a fan of Deanna Troi, and reading this, I realized she's always been my favorite Next Generation character, and I haven't read too many books where she's the central character. So I really loved reading a book where she's the main character and you get a lot from her perspective.
Okay, great. So we'll just say goodbye now until next time.
And next time we will be talking about the Kobayashi Maru, the original series one, because there's 2 now with that title.
Right, that's right. Remember the right one. Yes, the TOS Kobayashi Maru.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.